does give people a great deal of motivation to try to go out there and change the world. After Bolivia, I would like you to accompany me to Uganda, to East Africa. About Uganda, you are likely to have heard a great deal, particularly relating to the AIDS epidemic. It used to have in 1980s an extremely high prevalence of HIV infection in capital, in Kampala, reaching up to almost 25%. It's one of the few African countries where both HIV infection and the AIDS epidemic has more or less stabilized. HIV infection is leveling off. The epidemic is still killing people. AIDS is not, as it is in Western European countries where people can afford expensive treatment, a chronic disease, but rather a disease which kills fairly fast. One reason why Uganda has been, regardless of armed conflicts and poverty, fairly successful in decreasing HIV infections was strong public information campaign. And a part of this campaign is the illustration which I'm showing to you. Those of you who have very good eyesight or who are close will be able to see that this is Uganda's school kit, which means it is a reproduction of the original illustration which is used for 7- and 8-year-olds in school books, which tells us now a great deal of interesting things about what we are teaching children. Once we do manage to get them into classrooms, to install them on chairs, and we tell them about this very important thing called AIDS. They have to know about this because they have to be able to protect themselves against it. Now, if one looks at the message, and the message comes from 1987 from primary school kit, presenting us the Ugandan family in a way which is but completely falsified. If you look at this presentation, it looks like romanticized vision of the family in Western industrialized countries from about 1960s. If one looks now what's wrong, the first thing which one sees, obviously, which is wrong, is the number of children. The average number of children per woman in Uganda is not 2, it's 7.8, which means we would have to multiply the number of the small ones to present it as 8 rather than 2. But then the other thing comes closer to HIV infection and AIDS epidemic, and this is the number of wives. Uganda happens to be a country where polygamy is prevalent. If you were to start researching the implications of polygamy in Uganda for the exercise of the right to education on Ugandan children, you would not have terribly much in terms of official documents to begin from. Firstly, if you were to look into all the existing statistics generated by the United Nations and specialized agencies on the prevalence of polygamy in the world, you would find none. United Nations Development Program, UNICEF, the World Bank, the United Nations Demographic Office, they go around excuse me, collecting all sorts of data, but we don't have a single piece of official statistics relating to polygamy. Why not? Because officially polygamy is not on the agenda. It's supposed not to exist. Now we are supposed to have entered the era of gender equality, of gender empowerment, of all sorts of pretty things, except that we will never get anywhere close to gender equality because, again, we have not started from the ground, from real life. You will find two illustrations in Uganda of the existence of polygamy. One of them is that all the existing research relating to HIV infection, thank you very much, was questioning this message which the school is conveying to small Ugandans. Have one faithful sexual partner for life, which doesn't work in polygamous relationships. It just can't. So this creates a bit of a consternation because it can't. But then the second one created even more consternation. In 1993, the Association of Second Wives and Concubines was formed in Uganda as a non-governmental organization. The whole country was speechless with consternation for 2 weeks. People didn't know what to say. Because how did these women dare to bring to light the question that they are the second or the seventh official wife of a particular husband, or that they are the third unofficial concubine of a husband who already has 8 wives. With 8 wives, he will have roughly 64 children. So if you now translate this relationship into what it means for education for children, then you will see what type of real-life problem one has to address. In a country like Uganda, to be able to put all primary school age children to school, you will have to count on 55% of your population being in school. You can't count on the rest, meaning 45% of Ugandan population paying tax, so that the government would be able to generate such a huge revenue which is necessary to keep half of its very young population in school. So you will have, in terms of funding, a tremendously big problem in trying to get the funds necessary to build schools, to hire and train teachers, to be able to give such large numbers of young Ugandans a good beginning for life. And that's where our United Nations comes in, the international donor community, individual donor governments, World Bank, UNICEF, what have you, because a country like Uganda obviously needs assistance. And it goes to some extent in the direction of implementing in practice something resembling international solidarity. It's a poor country, it's a young country, so those of us who are able to help should actually do something to help. So far so good. But then our help really makes things quite often very complicated. A country like Uganda, very much indebted country, and it's not the most recent government that created that debt, it's previous governments, some of them having been in line, one after the other, condemned by United Nations for gross and serious violations of human rights. So we know where the money went. It was not spent to school the children, but debt has to be repaid. Things have improved in terms of debt repayment considerably because Uganda qualified for debt repayment almost 2 years ago, the first country in the world to do so, and the money which was saved from servicing Uganda's debt, all of it was put into primary education to give schooling to children. You would say, great, wouldn't you? Things are working. Well, it's a sort of partly great, but still big problems. And one of the big problems is that even if we are talking about the international community, agencies within the United Nations,